Welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast, where we explore the game-changing understanding that can unlock new levels of performance and well-being in the workplace. If you want to be part of the new breed of leaders in business, if you're fed up with the conventional echo chamber, and if you want to be part of a revolution in human potential, then join us to discover the powerful resource that lives before our psychology.
Hello and welcome to the Quality of Mind Transforming Business podcast series. And today's episode, I've got a conversation lined up with a becoming regular on the show, Clare Dimond. And she's done a couple of great episodes with us already, which I'll put in the show notes. But Clare, welcome. Hello. How are you today?
Hello, Piers. Hi, Piers. I'm really well, thank you. I am so happy to be having this conversation with you.
Well, that makes two of us, so that's great. Clare, for people who might be new or haven't checked out your other episodes, can you just give us a 30 seconds or a minute intro into who you are and how come you do this kind of work?
Yeah, thank you. Well, yes, I'm a mum of two. I used to work in corporate marketing, global marketing, and I've always, alongside of all of that, was really fascinated by the mind and behavior and experience of life and mood and emotion. And so it's turned into really like a sort of completely full-time preoccupation, probably occupation, of writing and running courses and doing podcasts, all of it looking at different areas of life, like relationships or health, mental health, career, money, business, all of it, and how that relates to what's true, how it relates to really what is going on in the human experience and what is believed that actually can't possibly be true, and when it's believed creates so much confusion and exhaustion and conflict and illness, really. So I think fundamentally this is what we're talking about here. It applies to everything, and it's the sort of essence of human health and sanity. So I love it, and I'm so happy, and I love these conversations with you because you're as obsessed as I am, I would say.
True, absolutely true. I mean, once you start to see this stuff, it's very hard not to be in my mind. And actually, thank you for that, Clare. What we're going to try and do today, listeners, is talk about a subject which at one level is quite, one could argue, nuanced, even sophisticated, about the nature of what we are and how the human experience turns up. But we want to try and do this in a way that is also very relatable, accessible, and doesn't need you to be as obsessed as Clare and I are, or have lots of years experience in this. So we're going to try and do that tricky thing of getting the balance of showing the purity and the profundity and the nuance of it, as well as making this be something accessible that you can go, oh, yes, I see that. Now, the bit that I really wanted to talk to Clare about, because I think she's so good at talking about this from her books and her podcast, which she is prolific at, by the way, listeners, if you haven't checked them out already, is this apparently what might be conflicting idea of us not having free will, not having doership, and us also having an accountability and being custodians of what turns up in our worlds of thought, perception, and sensation. So we're going to try and do this at the two levels. I'm going to hand it over to Clare in a minute to talk about the distinction. But just to say to people that if you are brand new to this podcast, you probably won't have heard us talk about the idea that as a self, we don't have free will. Now, regular listeners, there's other episodes we've talked about free will, and we say actually there isn't a free will because everything that turns up for us in thought and perception and sensation is an appearance, and there's no separate me that puts those thoughts in there, and there's no separate me that chooses those thoughts. There's the appearance of choice, there's appearance of thinking, there's appearance of doing, but actually it's all coming through the system. And therefore we say there's no free will. Now you might hear there's no free will and go, oh my gosh, that means, is it all fate? Or do I have not to take responsibility? Because if it all just turns up, what's the point of me? Blah, blah, blah. And that's what we want to get into a little bit more today with this distinction. Now, I've probably already confused and complicated it in the last minute, but let's see if we can try and make this accessible as well as nuanced and transformative for people. So, Claire, over to you to say your opening gambit about this, and then we'll dig into it a bit more.
Yes, thank you, Piers. It's the ultimate question, this, and it's at the heart of everything, every aspect of our lives, every way society is organized, and it all spins around what the concept of the I is, and this is why it's so hard. It's why the human mind really struggles to get to grips with this, because when the I, when we're talking, I'm going to go to the shops, I'm going to go to work. What does that I contain? It's one letter, one capital letter, and yet in it is every single assumption and belief and presupposition of what that really is. What is it? What is that I? And at the core of all of our I's, really, we could say, is two things perhaps which are really intertwined. The first is that I is separate and distinct. It exists as an objective, separate entity. So there's, within this Clare body, there is a separate Clare I that's separate from other people. It exists in an objectively separate reality. And that I is in control. That I is the thing that makes the decisions, that makes the choices, that orchestrates the behavior, that is saying these words now, that is doing the listening. And as long as that's the unquestioned existence of me, a conversation about free will looks impossible, because if any suggestion that there's no free will says there's no I, because this I is just taken as the chooser, the doer. But and therefore it would mean there's no existence. I don't exist. But the deep knowing is I do exist. There's existence happening, there's experience happening. And so if someone says there's no free will, this mind that is unquestioned with this I says there must be, because I exist. But what we're looking at is that existence isn't the same as a chooser doer. We're saying, yes, absolutely, there's existence, and that's all there is. And there's this existence is happening within a body and a human body mind. And this human body mind is powerfully wired with a mind that creates concepts, and that's its superpower, is to create mental representations of things, past, present, other people, anything that's not here right now is a mental representation. And the most powerful mental representation of all is a concept of me, a concept of me that is held mentally, but actually doesn't exist other than that. And so this is why we've got this conundrum, because that mentally held separate concept of me that contains all the beliefs, all the fears, all the insecurities looks so true. That looks like it just looks like reality. But this conversation is saying that construct is 100% illusion. It doesn't even exist anywhere. It has no, there's a phone here and a computer and a cup. That has an apparent reality, but that mental construct of what I am is complete illusion. And
right.
yeah, should I stop there?
Well, I just wanted to unpack, because there's loads in what you said, and it's been beautifully articulated, just to slow it down for people who may be a little newer to this. So it would appear to us, if we don't really inquire, and we've been invisibly, innocently conditioned to think this, that when I choose what to have for breakfast, like this morning I had an apple and a bit of a banana, I chose that, Piers chose that, and I chose to have a banana and an apple, right? I chose that. That was me. And I would even say, I chose what to have for breakfast. And we've been told conventionally that that's my choice, that the I in that is me, a separate body mind that starts with my brain, and then it has a skin and a body, and it perceives an external world. And that, and we've been comfortable thinking that since anyone tells anything differently. And then if you go into direct experience, so forget anything we've been told and actually just have a look from real time, forgetting the past, forgetting the present, the future, forgetting anything conceptual, just literally you're an alien dropped into this moment, and you look at it, you can't actually find that separate Piers or Clare that's choosing breakfast. They don't really exist. The appearance of a thing that is Piers, that's then having the appearance of a thought saying, do you want a banana? And there's an appearance of Piers going, have a banana, thanks. That's all happening, but it's not separate to everything else. So we've got then, well, so I'm not really a separate chooser because it's just coming through the system. Yet there is existence. There is the unfolding of all of that all the time. So we've got this sense of being something that is involved in this at the most intimate level, which is the realness of existence, yet it's not down to me. It's not down to little me. So there
is no little me.
There is no little me apart from the appearance when my mind gets told it's a little me, because when we were little, and this is always fascinating, isn't it? You know, when with our little kiddies, we would tell them things like, well, you shouldn't have done that.
Yes.
You chose to hit your sister. You shouldn't have done that. Or why didn't you choose to tidy your bedroom? Or so we're told, oh, you had a sense of agency, you had volition, as in it was your control. Now, just because we have the appearance of choice, comes from programming at the meta level and the individuated level, doesn't mean we have a separate ability to choose. As a separate ability. So choices coming through.
I think maybe it would help to because the use of the pronouns is because when we say we don't have the ability to choose, that there literally isn't a chooser, is there? And so there are body minds. So there are bodies, just as there are phones, there are bodies.
Yes.
And no one is denying the existence of that. The way they appear is entirely a function of the perceiver, but that's not denying their existence. So this phone, say, there is a phone, but the whole way the phone appears is because of the way it's being perceived here or over there by you. So there are these body minds. The big question is there a separate individual decider within them that is the sort of is what the mind takes to be the I? And the answer is no, there isn't. So that's the ego that says I'm separate, I'm doing this. And this conversation is saying it doesn't even happen. So choosing is happening at breakfast, say. Apples and bananas are being chosen, everything about that choice is happening from a programmed, learned system that has no capacity for independent choice separate from that.
Yes. And if people want to know that for themselves rather than just hear us, then this is where we recommend direct inquiry. Check it out. Any human being can check that out for themselves by going into any moment of experience, taking away everything that's learned and conditioned, and just seeing whether that's true for them or not. And our view would be that if you do that in the way that we're suggesting, we've got other podcasts and guides on this, you will find out exactly what Claire's just said. There is no separate chooser of the banana and the apple. It's just coming through. Now, you could say, oh, well, it's coming through because in the past I chose to read a book about bananas being healthy for breakfast. Yes, but you didn't choose that either. So however far back you go, there's still no chooser. Even if you go, well, yes, but I had that choice appear in my mind because I made a choice a while ago to be healthy breakfast eater or whatever it is. You never made that choice either. So there's never been it. However far back you go.
And there's no you not making the choice.
There's no you not making the choice, because the you that you think's making the choice is also just an appearance in thought.
Yeah.
So now, then we get to our nub, don't we? Our bit that can throw people is, well, okay, if people are okay with that from a direct experience, they go, well, this sense of, I think you called it beautifully, this sense of existence that we have that's kind of intrinsic and intimate and consistent for us, of my experience turning up, surely that means I'm the I, right? Well, how do those two fit together, I think is what you were starting to point to. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think, so what I think is interesting, what you were saying there is you could use this term identified mind, which is really an experience of being, which is everything that I think is true. Everything I think about me is true. Everything I think about other people is true. Everything I think about the world is true. There's a real separate me here in a real separate objective world, and that's just reality. So that's an identified mind, a believing mind, a mind that isn't, largely because no one's ever suggested it, there's no questioning in it. And so that identified mind believes it's the chooser. I'm, like you're saying, I'm making this choice, and that contains so much blame and shame in it, because it looks like there could have been another choice made. And what we're considering is, as that identified mind is questioned, there's an exploration of reality that more and more reveals there's no idea how talking is happening now and listening is happening now. Literally, the mind cannot fathom how that is happening, and yet it thinks it's the one doing it. So as these things become more and more obvious, that identified mind loses its beliefs. It loses everything that's not true, and settles back into what is true, which is existence, pure presence, witnessing, consciousness. And that really is what enlightenment is everything about the separate idea of me that isn't true falls away.
Can we just debunk a bit of language as we're going through here? So
Yeah.
if I'm doing my spiritual language bingo card, which I'm trying to, de-fluff, there's words like witnessing in there, enlightened and true, right? So I want to just try and make these words ordinary for people if possible, because they'll go, oh, witnessing, what's that mean? So let's just take, because what you said there was that once we start to see this, we just come back into the truth of existence and just witnessing. Now, what do we mean when we say that? Can you say what you think you mean by that, and then I'll say whether that fits with
Sure.
what I was hearing in those words. So if you can try and explain that in a really kind of like 6-year-old language.
Yeah. So, so at its most basic, it's really what we could consider is what the mind is attention, and it creates it's like a sort of light that puts attention on things, and that's all. So witnessing is just the stage or the screen on which experience appears.
Yes. And I think, to me, a good distinction to spot in witnessing is you might think, well, I'm witnessing, but when we're saying I in that respect, we mean me, separate body, mind, Piers is witnessing, and that's not what you're pointing to with witnessing.
No, that's right.
So
that's a good distinction,
because
no
really the object in there.
The witness, so the pure witnessing, really, which is, it's like a pure screen or an empty stage. That is only possible as all the meaning and interpretation and personalizing falls away. So if we consider this podcast, there's attention directed on what Piers is saying. The more empty that attention, the more in reality the whole system is. But if that attention is distorted by, insecurity, fear, what's everyone going to think of me? What if I mess this up? What if I'm saying this wrong? Or even like these are like rigid beliefs. That whole attention space is completely distorted by the personal, by the identified mind. So the identified mind is really actively creating stuff in that space that isn't there. It's a projection from everything that makes the ego up, which is the fears and shame and insecurity.
And what's fascinating, isn't it? So we have the raw, neutral, just turning up of what is, if I can use that phrase, which is this is a loaded word, but uncontaminated by the self-identified mind. And that's when we're really present. There's not even a separate subject, object, witness world. Yeah. It just is, is, that there's no me in the world. And that's when we're in the most beautiful, let's say, flow state, you could call it that, to use a bit of language. Things are just arising, but there's no me arising to see them. They're just turning up. And then, we don't spend much of our time there, maybe 1 or 2 seconds if we're lucky, more if we start to see this direction, hopefully. And then happens is this self-identified mind projects into that world, so it doesn't look like it's being projected into it, right? This is the cunning thing it does. It doesn't go, oh, by the way, I'm now going to put some of your self-identified stuff into reality. It doesn't tell you that. It looks like it is the world.
Yes.
Right? And it might turn up in someone else's behavior, or it might turn up in an object, or it might turn up in a perception. So it doesn't look like it's coming from our self-identified mind. There's no flag saying it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Well, there sort of is in the feeling state, but we don't really notice that. And then it looks like that's what it looks like the world is.
Yes. Brilliant.
So that's the cunning trick, isn't it, of what we're talking about here. So when we fall back into that just pure presence and isness, I would say the witness is the widest sense of a witness. It's not even me witnessing. That's what you're saying about the pure, and that's what you call truth.
Yes.
And as you were saying that, it reminded me of a conversation we had in the podcast a while ago where we got into the word truth, because I have a particular way I use the phrase real and true and all this kind of stuff. So because let's not go there now, people can listen to that one again. But I think what we're saying is that for people to distinguish between a moment of experience that is at its rawest, purest isness, not being flavored by the individuated conditioning and self-identified mind, which when it gets busy starts to give all that insecurity and suffering and all that kind of stuff, because it's the resistance to the isness, right? Now, so if we can make that distinction, that the first distinction, well, a distinction we're asking people to make between those two?
Well, like it's a sort of theoretical distinction.
Yeah.
Because I would say it's brilliant how you described it, and the mind can't make that distinction, because that space that you've described is the absence of any sort of personalized judgment. It's revealed by the ongoing dissolution of all those aspects that the identified mind thinks that have to happen in order for it to survive and succeed and be loved and all the rest of it.
Yes. So I like what you said there. It's a theoretical distinction, because you couldn't do that distinction in the moment. It would be impossible, because it's my fridge door analogy. Does the fridge light go off when you open the door? You can't tell that, right? But we can tell, I think, by, well, the way I know is the contrast. So, as you say, by the dissolution, when it changes, you can almost tell. I mean, you can't tell in the moment, but you can tell.
The suffering in any moment, and that feeling of, particularly that feeling of contraction and of me and them, and of a mind that is really ramped up and engaged in survival, really, of me versus this separately distinct external world. That suffering is the perfection of the design that says, right now, the mind is fighting its own projection. It's the rumble strip in the road, isn't it? And that's the indicator, as I call it, that, hey, that's where I'm heading. So that's the beauty of the design, is that there's the sensational space that we're in gives us a clue. And what's happened is we've all become so comfortably numb to think that's what life feels like, that we don't question it. We think, well, life feels like that. That's not an indication of the conscious telling me I'm caught up. That's what work feels like that. Parenting feels like that. Having no money feels like that. Loneliness feels like that. So we're misinterpreting the signal. Now, let's get back to the nub of what we were trying to point to in this one, which is, so we've set up this apparent paradox that everything's just arising. There's no separate chooser doer. And the appearance of one is also a lovely illusion. Yet the very nature of our existence is the realness, I'll say, I use the word realness rather than trueness, the realness of being alive with choices and thoughts and perceptions and sensations happening. And that feels really innate to us and individuated to us. I'm not going to use the word separate. I'm going to use the word individuated. And what turns up for us, for me, say, in my moment-to-moment experience, is the way I would look at it is that's mine in a way. There's a traceability for why I see what I see and feel what I feel. Not that we're trying to analyze it and trace it in that way, but that's mine. So it's showing me my individuatedness, and it's at the forefront of pure impersonal consciousness and individuated whirlpool me.
appearance of me. Right. Do what you want with what I just said there.
Yes. Yes. So if we say the only thing that is true has to exist prior to any form, really, because form is changing all the time, whether it's body, thought, belief, words, actions, all of that is held in perception. But without form, without a sensory body, there is no experience. There is no there's nothing, is there? Without that, there's just intelligence, or there's just life. There's just consciousness. Without a form for that to sort of localize or associate with, there's no experience. And so any experience requires a form to happen. And that form, we say us, but again, that really depends what the us is, isn't it? But that form, that body mind, in which consciousness or aliveness, intelligence is associated, is very programmed, isn't it? It's programmed genetically, programmed environmentally, and that's the means through which all experience is happening. And what we're considered, so this sort of nub that we're like the sort of fundamental, seemingly paradox, but actual logic is that there's no chooser or doer in that body mind. It's operating according to whatever the subconscious program is running. And because it's through that body mind that the entire universe appears, everything happens within that sensory sphere, which is so minute, really, in terms of the availability of what can be perceived. It's tiny, but that creates everything. So that's the individuated perception. And what I think is really interesting is how through that individuated perception, the body mind is in a learning extravaganza, really, isn't it? It's data all the time coming in, continually upgrading that perceptual system so that it becomes more and more able, more capacity, more present to reality. And that is what, when I talk about accountability, that's what I mean by that, is this recognition there isn't an I choosing doing. And the more obvious that is, in fact, and this is the irony, the more there's just a system in reality learning. And a recognition that the way everything appears through that system is the creation of that system.
Yeah. So let me play that back to you, because I love the learning extravaganza that is the intelligence of the system. So this learning extravaganza is that everything that is turning up for us through our individuated experience is, as you said, data, machine learning, if you want to put it in modern language, via our perceptual and sensory system, updating itself. Often we would call that a realization, when oh wow, gosh, look what I've seen, and it's an intelligence is just we're chat GPT 5 when we're in that mode, right? And the paradox is that works so much better when we see there's no me doing that.
Brilliant. Yeah. I love how you say that.
Right. So the irony is, because I want my learning extravaganza machine to be on full force, I better be in charge of my learning extravaganza machine, because that's what we've been taught. Well, if you want to learn, if you want to be a great leader, you need to do that. Right. That's what we've been taught. Great. I want to be a great leader. I want to learn. Right. Now, all of our learning, our extravaganza, is happening when we forget where the I. Well, sorry, if I put that in more precise language, when we recognize what the I is and what it isn't, which is what we've been talking about earlier in the podcast. So to really maximize and enhance our experience of being alive and the machine learning, paradoxically, we need to recognize there's no separate free will and doer.
We don't need to recognize it, but that is the truth.
Yeah, sorry, you're quite right, because it's happening anyway.
Yeah.
It reveals, there's a revealing of that.
It's just that when everything is whirring around this central me, which is really made of all the wounds, all the fear, all the insecurity, everything that creates this fragility of a separate existence of me, when it takes all the energy, like takes all the focus, it's continually projecting out all the people and the circumstances from the past, and then fighting or fleeing from them. Learning is happening anyway. It's just that the heart, like 90% of the system isn't operating in reality. It's operating really in the past, or trying to secure a future that doesn't exist. And so the ending of that is an enormous freeing up. It's like a full aligning of the system now to just be operating with actual data.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really great distinction, is that it is happening because it couldn't not be, in a way, because we have no free will to make it not happen. But it's what we're seeing about that, and I think we probably use the word resistance and diversion of resources to the wrong place.
So resistance is a product of a mind that is built out of defending a fragile sense of existence and self. So resistance and seeking are as Rupert Sparrow says, they're the activities of that fragile ego. They have to happen. There's no one doing it. Equally, there's no one who chooses not to do that. The seeking and the resisting stops as that operation makes no sense.
Which is part of the learning extravaganza, right?
Yes.
So can you say it like
learning extravaganza?
I just love that phrase. So I'm going to use that a lot. So a key feature of the learning extravaganza is the system recognizes that. I totally get there's no peers recognizing that. I mean, it might look like there is, but there isn't really. The system recognizes that as part of its own extravaganza of learning. That becomes,
it's just gone, isn't it? It just disappears.
Yeah. And that is what people might call awakening or enlightenment, or whatever phrases you want to put to it, right? Which we don't need to get into the language on that right now, but that is part of. So that's why, people will say it's our gift. It's everyone's right to see this. And, it's not like it's only certain people can have this, because we're all part of the same thing. Of course we are. So it's the recognition, it's that being recognized as an activity. That's the key. So let's just now, because I want to try and make this just as an example. So let's take an example of this happening. Let's take the workplace. So someone's struggling with a relationship, at work or with a difficult boss or something like that, and of how differently, although the process is the same, how differently that appears from the two perspectives. Do you want a little go at that?
Yes. Okay. So, yeah, that's a really nice example. And there's this lovely quote from Terence Real, who wrote the book Us. He said, "There's no such thing as overreaction to something. It's just that what someone's reacting to might not be what's there." So
nice. I hadn't heard that. That's really
such a great book as well. So we've got this boss, and every time we're in a meeting with them, every time there's something being asked to do, there's a reaction of fight or flight, really. Like there's a severe reaction. Survival is under threat, and it looks completely as though everything the mind is saying in that moment is true. It looks just real, and it looks like it's present time. And what we're suggesting is any moment when the experience is one of complete separation. There's me separate here. There's that boss over there exactly as I think they are. That suffering, that struggle of survival really is saying, okay, there's something here to be considered. There's something. The mind is going crazy here. There's ramped up emotion. There's fear and shame and insecurity, and all of this is saying this is a play out of the past, really. And so, rather than trying to find solutions within that, as though everything, like, without questioning any of the elements of it, this conversation would say, whenever there's suffering, just allow that suffering in. Mm-hmm. Because the attempt to get away from feelings of insecurity or shame or fear is what's maintaining this situation and basically re-traumatizing the whole system over and over again with every single meeting with the boss. So instead of that, which is chaos and ill health and stress and burnout and all the rest of it, have those feelings so that the body mind becomes this flow space, really, in which there is the pure health of whatever sensation is there to be had is had. And at the same time, recognize what is going on in the mind. And this isn't denial at all. This is bringing the whole system back into a space of sanity. And really, ultimately, we haven't got time to, maybe this is another podcast, but the more, and I've got 7 power questions, which we could talk about another time, which bring the mind into this space of source accountability that shows how this boss is a creation of this perception right now. And the more accountability there is for the perception here, the behaviors here, the identification here, all of it, that the boss isn't anymore a separate entity. The boss is us. There is no separation between self and boss. It's obvious. They're made of the same conditioning. And from that, and it doesn't mean we don't say to the boss, you're giving me too much work, or I need more money, or I don't want to be spoken to like that in a meeting. In fact, all of those are freed up as the resistance ends. Yeah. So I'll try and put a bow on it. So any suffering that we're having, reaction in a way that's appearing, is a resistance to the is. Any
resistance is from that self-identified mind. And when we lean into that self-identified mind with just a seeing the I that we've been talking about, seeing what we truly are, that leaning in allows that to come through the system. The system comes back into flow and dynamism, which is what it is. And in that, we still see what's happening, right? Of course we do. But it doesn't look like it's a separate boss. Doesn't look like there's a me that needs to protect and seek. Doesn't appear like that anymore. And instead, the response that will appear will be still common sense and like, well, I'm not doing that. Or how about that? Curiosity.
It would just be about the thing. It would just be about the work or the times or the tone.
Yeah, it would just denoise it all. Let it be pure signal with some understanding, some compassion, maybe some assertiveness if need be. Whatever is needed, the learning extravaganza will pump in the system because you know how to go to work, right? So
yes, great.
But we have to see that. Well, we have to. There's a seeing, allowing a seeing of that to happen. Now, Clare, I'm really conscious of your time, and you've just put the beautiful teaser in that you have 7 questions that allows this to happen. So you basically got to do a second podcast on this now.
We
can't say that to listeners and then not show them. So we will have to do.
We'll do that. We will. Yeah.
Another one. But I want to just thank you for coming on, because I think there's so much in what we said that I find interesting and curious to explore more. So is there a final 20 seconds you want to give before you have to shoot off?
I would say what we've talked about here is it. Like really this is ultimate sanity, and it is the birthright of every body mind to return to that sanity. So yeah, I've loved this conversation. Thank you, Piers. And
listeners, it's sanity with a built-in learning extravaganza. Remember that. How much more could you ask for? So listeners, as usual, have fun being curious, and love to hear your feedback and comments, insights, everything like that. And promise I'll try and persuade Clare to come and do a part 2 to this. So listeners, as usual, have fun being curious, and catch you next time.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast and want to know more, check out our website at qualityofmind.biz. And also feel free to reach out and leave us a review or a comment. Until next time, have fun being curious.